This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about a known topic for all of you, and that's SHAPU. So you must all be knowing what is the full form of SHAPU. It means seasonal hyperacute panuveitis. Now the topic itself, the title itself speaks 1,000 words. Why seasonal? Why hyperacute and why panuveitis? So each of this term will be explained in the subsequent slides. When you notice that in every pictures, you'll be noticing that there will be presentation or problem only in the one eye. For example, in this slide, the left eye is red with something white material inside the anterior chamber of the left eye. But in this next slide, again, only one eye. That's the now it's the turn of right eye. The right eye has congestion and white pupillary glow. So SAPU is a disease which is usually and by rule unilateral. And this was first identified in 1975. Just imagine, it was identified 45 years ago in a school of Pokhara, that is a Lamidara school, where the school children suddenly developed redness in a single eye in a particular season. That's why there's a term called a seasonality or the seasonal occurrence. It does not occur in or throughout the year, only in a particular season. That particular season is after the monsoon. When the rainfall stops, usually when the rainfall stops after Shravan, or if we convert it into the English calendar, when after August, the cases of SHAPU begin to come. And this usually lasts till the December. The peak usually occurs during the Dasi and Tihar festival. So it has a seasonal appearance, and that too has a rationale. We'll talk about this further on. And moreover, this we don't know why this disease loves children. It could be a male child or a female child, but they are morely found predominantly among the pediatric population. And luckily, it affects only one eye. More luckily, it is a disease of no recurrence. So it's a one-time disease in a lifetime opportunity. But how does it appear? There is sudden onset of red eye, but no discharge. This is a point which differentiates it from conjunctivitis. Conjunctivitis may usually present with red eye. It can present with unilateral presentation initially and could be bilateral later. But the point to differentiate between conjunctivitis and SHAPU is there is no discharge in case of SHAPU. But what is alarming or what is different from conjunctivitis? That is, there is dramatic loss of vision. The child may go blind within a week. So it is so much dramatic. So there can be dramatic loss of vision. That loss of vision can start within 48 hours. There is sudden onset of redness in one eye. After or within 48 hours, there is no vision. Why can it happen? It can happen because of the exudation in the eye or subsequent finding in the posterior part of the retina. Now, what is peculiar about SHAPU? How does it differ in appearance from other disease is white pupil with red eye. Can you see the picture at the top? There is a red eye in one side and there is white pupil. Subsequently, in the other sides also. If we don't tackle this, there can be complications which are shown below in the USA photograph. There can be dense vitreous exudation in the vitreous. There can be retinal detachment, and this can lead to loss of vision, loss of sight forever. And not in loss of sight, there can be decrease in the size of the eye, that is leading to the thighs bulbi. So suddenly a healthy child, I'm talking about a healthy child, not an immunocompromised. A healthy person may develop sudden redness followed by decreased vision. The decreased vision may be lifelong. Moreover, there can be decrease in the size. So there is functional loss as well as anatomical or cosmetic disfigurement of the eye. And that's quite a mental issue for that particular case. So why is this white glow? It is very important to understand. The white glow is basically because of this dense exudation in the vitreous. So anything, if the pus collection is dense in the vitreous, the glow or the reflection is not the use a red glow. That's why you will see, or we will see, the white glow in the eye. And very important thing that we have to notice is these patients never ever give history of any trauma or any surgery in the past. So these are the group of healthy people, healthy populations. And most important part is we yet don't know what is the cause of this disease. Is it because of infection or because of inflammation? So it has got two arms. Either it is because of infection leading to endophthalmitis, or inflammation or immunological reaction because of the toxins present in the surrounding related to some insect. We'll talk about it later, but very important thing why we're so much talking about Shapu is the disease of our national identity, because it has been reported only from Nepal till date. If we don't try to explore this disease, if we don't try to identify the etiology of this disease, no one is going to help us, because this is a disease which is confined within a particular geographic location of Nepal. So not whole Nepal is affected, only a particular geographic area people become affected by it. Look, this is a child who had presented with sudden onset of red eye in the left eye. This child was also from child was from Pokhara, and when we examine the eye of that child, we find that there is dense congestions, both circumcorneal and diffuse congestion is present, and you can see the central white pupillary reflex. So this white pupillary reflex is not due to cataract. So this could come, SAPO can come as a differential diagnosis of leukocoria. One of the important causes of leukocoria is retinoblastoma, okay, or the congenital cataract. But let me make clear, in SAPO, the white glow is not because of the cataract. It is because of the vitreous exudation, which is giving the glow white. And this can be proved with the presence of dense exudation in the vitreous, as evidenced by the ultrasonography of the child. So in such condition, we may not be able to look further into the posterior part of the retina because of the dense exudation, and that's where the role of ultrasonograph plays important. So this is another example. You can see dense reaction in the anterior chamber, leading to the collection of pus in the anterior chamber, that is called as hypopyon. There is dense fibrin or exudate just in front of the pupil. There is no glow inside. We can just see the white reflex. That could be because of the dense exudation surrounding the pupillary margin, and yes, the congestion. So any case of sudden onset of acute anterior uveitis with hypopyon, we have to look it cautiously, especially if it is during the outbreak time of SAPO. We are a bit relaxed in 2020, except for the corona. From the SAPO part, we were a bit relaxed because SAPO usually comes in odd year. The first outbreak occurred in 1975, then the second in 77, then 79, 81, like that. So the last outbreak was in 2019. So 2020 is a kind of a resting time for us, but again, we have to gear up and be prepared for 2021 outbreak. But one important, beside this important fact on the odd year, there can be sporadic occurrence. Some few outbreaks of SAPO cases even in even years. Okay, this we had experienced during 2012, and recently again in 2020, in the last month, we again had 4 cases of SAPO. So there can be sporadic outbreaks in even years, but usually the disease occurs during the odd years. So we can see that there's a red eye with white pupil. The vitreous is filled with dense exudate, obstructing the view of retina. And one important thing is, usually these eyes have low pressures. That's why a special trauma is given for the IOP in case of SAPO. That's called as malignant hypotension. You must have heard about malignant hypertension, but malignant hypotension means sudden decrease in pressure. If we think why so, the inflammation is so much there, there's dense exudation, this must be obstructing the outflow in the ecostemmal, and that should have led to increased IOP. But why decrease IOP? So there is a explanation that it starts from the anterior chamber. So the ciliary processes, the ciliary body are also involved. When the ciliary processes and body get inflamed, there will be decreased production of aqueous. This decreased production of aqueous is responsible for the decreased or the low intraocular pressure. Moreover, if the exudation spreads to the posterior part in the vitreous or in the retina, there will be development of the retinal detachment. Retinal detachment is also one of the factors which can lead to decreased IOP. But many of the times we see that the glow, we are talking about the white glow in a red eye, but many of the times we can see the variation of the color of the glow. This was white, but the next one, it could be a greenish or yellowish glow also. Again, you see only one eye of the child is affected. So we don't have exact data like this many cases might have been affected over this 44-45 years, but there is a rough estimate that maybe around 15,000 cases of SAPU must have been affected over these years, and we exactly don't know how many of them really went blind, because this is a disease of emergency and urgency. If we do delay, we are going to lose the sight, we are going to lose the size of the eye. So like the one I talked before, the color of the hypopyon can be different, usually white, creamy white, but it could be yellow, it could be greenish, it could be yellowish, and even in two cases they have mentioned about the brown tints in the color. Mostly these are the mobile hypopyon. If you tilt the head of that affected case, the hypopyon will also slide away. Now this SAPU saga, or the story of SAPU, has two parts. One is the good part. Good part is, thank God it affects only one eye. Thank God the other eye is spared. Thank God this is a disease which does not contaminate from one eye, or which is not transferred from one eye to other eye like conjunctivitis. Thank God it's one eye disease which does not reoccur. And this is the best news. The good news is, if we are able to identify the disease, if we are able to confirm the diagnosis on time, and if we are able to rescue that eye with the appropriate surgical and medical treatment, we can save the vision. That's a very good point. Okay, it's not that SAPU is always a blinding disease. You can prevent the blindness in the eye if you can intervene on time. These are the good part of the disease, but the bad part is the treatment that has to be undertaken for SAPU is not easily available in all the hospitals or eye centers of Nepal. Even if they are available, they are costly. That means the definitive treatment is usually the vitrectomy. So you have to have a retinal specialist, a vitreoretinal surgeon over there. You have to have the vitreoretinal setup for there. That's why it is a costly treatment, it could not be affordable to all the people. And the worst part of this disease is, if the patient, there is a gap, there is a latency between the onset of disease and presentation at the hospital, that eye is definitely going to lose the vision, because there will be sequences of complications like retinal detachment, retinal necrosis, which are present in such a stage that it's not going to be reversed. And once the vision is gone, usually the eyes goes into atrophy. You might have seen that in a paralyzed patient, the site of paralysis, like suppose the upper limb or the lower limb, whichever side is affected, that side goes unused. So subsequently it develops atrophy, that is a disuse atrophy. Similarly, in SAPU patient who does not receive treatment on time, and where the vision is decreased because of various mechanism with which the intraocular pressure goes low, this all lead to phthisis bulbi. So suddenly a school-going child develops redness, loses vision, loses the cosmetic outlook, and by the time he is back to his work, at his school, if it is an adult, at his working place, then the child is Not only no sight, also the small eye. So everyone is like accusing him or like calling him Kano. That can lead to a great mental health disarrangement, and that can lead to the loss of self-esteem of that child. So we need to be very careful and identify this disease on time. So this is how it presents, and what we do is immediately after the case comes, we try to take the culture of that post material either from the aqueous or from the vitreous. You can see that in this syringe, this is we are taking the sample from the vitreous. In this syringe, you can see this yellowish exudation being aspirated. Many of the time, when we are aspirating, at the same time, we are getting intravitreal injections also. The intravitreal injections usually are the antibiotics with intravitreal steroids. Okay, and if we think that the child or the person is not responding within 72 hours of the first injection, then the next mode is to clear the pus as a whole, and for that we need vitrectomy. This is the vitrectomy being performed by Dr. Pratap in one of the Shapu cases. But if we take time in intervening this, then what happens like this? There's a total retinal detachment. At this stage, we can't do anything. So this is like loss of sight in one eye. So this, when we are taking the vitreous sample, at the same time, I told that we are giving intravitreal injections also. We usually give 3 injections. One is vancomycin, next is ceftazidime, and third is steroid, dexamethasone. This is for the intravitreal management. Similarly, we give injection in the conjunctival space also. Vanco, this is Genta and Dexa injection, gentamicin and dexamethasone. This lower side is for the subconjunctival injection. So we have found that during that particular season of that year, the Shapu case, they can come individually or they can come in clusters. So 5-6 SAPU cases in a time, that's quite ridiculous, because you have to give individual attention, individual priority, and it's an emergency condition, so you have to operate on time. That's very challenging. And main challenges, usually these are the children's, and in children's, doing surgery is not important because you have to get this child admitted, you have to get the pre-anesthetic checkup because you have to perform surgery on general anesthesia. If it would have been adult case, then we would have directly taken to our OT, do the surgery just in local anesthesia. But in a case of child, that's very difficult. So this upper one was the cluster of 5 cases in a day. There was in early 90 or this early 20s photograph. Okay, and this lower cases, in our experience, we had 3 cases of Shapu in maximum in a day. This was of 2017 outbreak. So what we did is, since we are confused whether to treat just with antibiotics or to add on to steroids, we don't have a exact data. So we thought that let's do a national level multicentric study, which will at least give us information what are the risk factors for Shapu. So for that, all the big hospitals in Kathmandu, including the Pokhara Hospital, got united, and we came to in that was for 2017. Okay, in 2017 outbreak. So at that time we had 35 cases. After 35 cases, 30 were from province 4 itself, that was from Gandaki province. So you can see that mainly from Kaski district, Lamjung, Parbat, Magdi, etc. And the rest case were this and that scatters in other provinces in 2 and 3. So now at least we can say that yes, it is a disease mainly in this Pokhara Gandaki province. Now, if this disease would have been seen more along the Tarai belt, then we could have made an assertion that this disease should also be prevalent in India, because the Tarai belt means it is close to the Indian borders. But we don't have any cases of Shapu from India, and that's also quite amazing. And why? It's not even in the hilly region, even in the western part of Nepal. So there might be something climatic influence, there might be some geographical influence, which is occurring, which is helping for this disease to occur mainly in this province, this Gandaki province. So one of the explanation for this, it could be the caves that are present in Pokhara. Let me talk to that later on. So these were few of the cases which we had seen, and what we did is for every case that we saw in our hospital, we went back to their homes, their whether it was their bedrooms or their kitchens or their playing station. We did a survey taking, for one case we took 3 controls, okay, and we did a retrospectively, we did the survey about the risk factors of the diseases. At the same time, as I told, for one case, 3 controls: age match, geography match, gender match controls. So we had to identify the similar kind of child in that particular area, locality, escaping every 5th household. Okay, that was a criteria for enrollment in our study. And sometimes these child that cases belong to such villages in their locality that our collector had to cross hills to get that 5th house. So that was quite challenging case, but we could complete it successfully. So this was how cases and controls were reached. And as I mentioned, there were 41 cases in total reported in Nepal during 2017 outbreak, but out of that 6 could not be tracked. So we had enrolled 35 cases, and for 1:3 ratio, 105 controls. So what was the outcome? As we talked about before, mainly this disease is prevalent among the children. So 71.42% were children less than 16 years. And how children was how young we had this child. The third picture, the child was 38 days old child. So this is now till in the world, this is the youngest reported case of SHAPU till date, a 38-day-old child. You can see this child wrapped in a blanket, and the mother had also very promising history that she had seen this moth in the tube light. Suddenly that moth fell over the blanket of the child. The mother tried to remove that moth. The moth then sat over the eye of the child, and the next day the child had redness. And the story of this child as the youngest reported case of SAPU has now been reported or published in American Journal also. So when we study what is the month where it is commonly occurring, we found that September is the most prevalent month during the odd years, where the SAPU in cases suddenly hike up. Our next concern was, this is what I just sort of say, August and September were mainly the month of focus, mainly the September. Then our next concern is like, when was that particular duration in a day where the first symptom was noted? So it was found that the symptom was noted by the parents, or in case of adult by themselves, especially when they got up early in the morning. That is, something might have happened in the overnight time. Something might have called, we are going to talk about the room, the corridor lights, the white bulbs also. So where these white moths are frequently attracted. So what used to happen is, like in earlier times, we used to mainly there used to be the yellow bulbs. Compared to yellow bulbs, these white bulbs, they attract more moths. And if they are usually habit of leaving the corridor lights on, they keeping the window opens, or not using mosquito nets, this could be one of the cause for attractions of the or the contact of the person with the white moths in the night time. So they are developing features in the early morning, because 54 responded that they had symptoms in the first half before 12 p.m. of the day. And next thing, something we get surprised is, like this is very close to Corona also. We are now staying at home to protect ourselves from contracting COVID-19, and at that time also we try to identify what was the activities during which the first symptom was noticed, and that at that time it was found that 48% maximum they said that they were at home when they had contracted the disease. So this is quite opposite to this COVID time. And we had run many risk factors like biological risk factors and chemical risk factors, behavioral risk factors. Out of them, we found that those who had come in contact with the physical contact with the moths, they were the one who were prone to develop, or who usually reported to develop the symptoms of SHAPU. Next, we had also analyzed, as I told earlier, the use of mosquito net, the use of the regular use or regular habit of keeping the corridor light on at night. They were quite this was adopted. This behavior was adopted both by the control group and the case group. So we couldn't prove that there was any statistical difference between them, but yes, what was statistically significant was the physical contact with the moths prior to the development of this disease, and the ratio of developing disease among those who had physical contact was 6.89 times higher compared to the control group. So what moths, which moth are we talking about? Let me focus you. This is the picture of the moth that we had taken ourselves, and we have the collections of around 20-30 variant of moths, and we show pictures to all the patients saying that which is the probable type of moth that you saw in your environment before developing the symptoms. And usually the answer comes like this. This is the white moth with the black striation. Let us be clear that there are not any like 2 or 3 variants. There are 160 variant of moths available in Nepal. Okay, this same, out of this there are 3 special variant of particular type of white moth, which is called as Gazelina, and that Gazelina has also again 3 variant. Out of that, Gazelina chrysophoria are basically thought to be culprit for this disease. This is not said by us. We have the entomologist in our team, and this is the finding of the entomologist. And among that Gazelina also, so this white moth with black striation. So among this, the female variant of Gazelina. The one picture on your left is the female variant. So how do you identify? You can see this yellow part are the eggs. Okay, this brown are the small fine hairs which are present around the eggs. So we all know a mother always try to protect their children. This female variant is trying to protect the eggs with the presence of these brown hairs. Okay, and we come to know that this brown hairs, the shaft of the hairs, they contain toxins. They are very toxic toxins. When the hairs come in contact with any object in our room or with our clothes, okay, this could be more dangerous than this corona. If it is this hairs are over our towels with which we wipe our face, or it's over our blanket, then indirectly also when we're coming in contact with the toxins that are present can destroy the ocular tissues within days. So this is one of the explanation that this disease, SHAPU disease, is mainly immunologically mediated because of the toxins that are present in the shaft of the hair in the female variant of Gazelina chrysophoria, which is a white moth. And this moth have a particular breeding time. Okay, they breed during the monsoon season, and they emerge, the moth or the larva variant emerge out during the post monsoon time. The breeding time usually takes 1 year to 18 months. That's why the disease is not every year. That's why it's occurring once in a 2-year time, and particularly after the monsoon period. So this is the lateral view, that is the front view. And we could further prove that yes, it is the moth hair is culprit, because we found this was one of our patients where we could identify this hair particles in the corneal tissue. We could evidence, we could make the evidence of that hair particle without anterior segment osity. Okay, here we can see this hair particles, and even there were changes in the corneal topographic finding when we compare the affected eye versus the non-affected eye. So this finally got published as moth hair in cornea in a case of Shapu in Indian Journal of Ophthalmology in last month issue. Now the key focus is like, okay, fine, okay, we found that the risk factor is white moth, but we are not yet sure which variant. We have a guess that it could be the Chrysophoria variant of Gazelina, but the moth study itself is not done yet. That study needs a wide arm, which is not yet possible in Nepal. Now, next thing is, okay, fine, if that is because, even if it is because of the moth, is it infective or is it just it is non-infective? That means, is the moth itself carrying infection? Is the moth contact with the eye leading to the transfer or transmission of the microorganism to the eye? That means the moth just acting the vector as a vector. So we don't know. Is the moth inducing some organism in the intact cornea leading to hyperacute reaction of the uveal tissue? We yet don't know, because we know that when the corneal surface is intact, there are only 3 organisms that can invade, like Neisseria, Corynebacterium, Neisseria meningitis, Corynebacterium diphtheria, and one more I forgot, maybe I forgot at this time. But how the organism is being transmitted in the anterior chamber or in the posterior ocular surface, in an intact ocular surface, that's a great topic to be resolved. The second option is it an immunological or hyperacute reaction due to the uveatogenic properties or toxins released from the moth? Yeah, that's very important factor. Are the toxins which are released from the hair particle of that moth direct culprit for leading to the hyperacute reaction, leading to hyperacute uveitis, subsequent first anterior uveitis and subsequent pan uveitis, or is it some release of some immunobiological agents, rise of some immunobiological markers that is leading, that is because of the uveatogenic property of that particular eye in that particular person? So we yet don't know. And the features that support it is a hyperacute reaction or immunological reaction is, first thing is the hyperacuteness of this disease, suddenly so hyperacute manifestation. Next is hypotony, and third is unilateral involvement. Usually infective conditions are bilateral. Okay, they get the disease in ocular surface of one eye get transmitted to other eye, but yet at this moment we don't have any particular backgrounds to prove that it's a infective etiology or immunological etiology. But what are the pros and cons? The pros and cons are, for infective side is, yes, there have been studies in the past which showed that a few microorganisms, especially the bacteria, had been isolated from the Shapu cases. But we don't know yet whether that was a primary infection or the secondary infection. And the bacteria was also not a single type of bacteria. There had been mentioned that it could be Streptococcus. In one report, they had mentioned as Streptococcus, in another as Staphylococcus. Somewhere they have mentioned as pneumonia, and even in one report, there is a mention about the identification of virus in sample also. So this vague, nothing is specific. Everything is like vague. We don't know exactly which organism, which microbe is it. So this is the, but at least they had given a vague identification of the organism. So these are the pros in for considering Shapu as an infective etiology. But the what are the favoring point in for immunological disease is its rapidness, sudden, hyperacute, and painless. One thing that I forgot to mention in the symptom are sudden onset of red eye with no discharge and usually no pain. If it is like in a conjunctivitis, it's more of discomfort than pain. But if it's usually in case of severe acute anterior uveitis, they have pain, they have photophobia. But But compared to that, the Shapu eyes usually have less pain. And when there is no pain, usually the child may not complain. That's why the parents might not notice, and that is the one of the cause for delay or the prolonged latency between the onset of symptom and presentation to the hospital, and then time of intervention. And by this time, we might have lost the sight of in that time. So this is a few slides which show the detection of the Streptococcus and Streptococcus pneumoniae and Staphylococcus aureus in 1-2 cases of Shapu. There's no definitive consensus on which is the particular culprit organism for this condition of Shapu. Now, there are a few cases. We are talking about moths, Shapu, but there are some cases where we have Shapu patients but no history of contact with moth. So these are yet to be explored. There may not be visible moths in the environment. There might be like as I mentioned earlier, there might be few moths which have contacted our daily wares and went away, or there might be no moth at all in the existing population of that patient. But even then, the patient comes with presentation of Shapu. So we yet have to explore those areas. And many of the time, the Shapu is also called as seasonal endophthalmitis because it presents with redness, it presents with inflammation in all the 3 layers of the retina, and both the cavities, both the anterior chamber and the vitreous cavity, special foci in the vitreous. So that's why it is called as endophthalmitis. But even if it's endophthalmitis, we know endophthalmitis are of 2 types. One is exogenous and next is endogenous. For exogenous, it could be either traumatic or post-surgical, post-traumatic or post-surgical. But I showed it in the very beginning slide that in Shapu cases there is no history of trauma, no history of surgery. So it is not a case of exogenous endophthalmitis. Then what's remaining? Endogenous endophthalmitis. Endogenous endophthalmitis means you have some foci inside your body. Okay, it could be a case of renal transplant. It could be a case of urinary tract infection. It could be a case of abscess anywhere in the body. That foci has migrated from blood to the eye, causing endophthalmitis. But again, this does not support, because when we doing tests for the Shapu cases, we are doing the blood sampling also. So we find all the normal parameters in the blood. No sign of infection, that is total counts are also normal. We do the blood cultures, we do urine culture, we even take the nasal swab also to rule out that this patient is Shapu or not, this patient has systemic excision or not. But all the time this comes negative. So we are still not in favor of calling it as seasonal endophthalmitis, because it is neither exogenous endophthalmitis nor endogenous endophthalmitis. And one important manifestation or presentation of endophthalmitis is profuse pain. The patient usually presents with pain, but this is not so with the Shapu cases. Now, what best option is to prove? Is it an infective etiology or is it an immunological etiology? The best option is conducting the PCR. Or every bacteria, it's very difficult to grow the virus, and even for bacteria also, every bacteria might not grow well in the cultures. So we identify the gold standard of identifying the bacteria is with the cultures, but this might not be possible. Like in our cases, like in the cases for the last 45 years, we are not confirmed this is the particular organism that's been grown in Shapu eyes. Okay. So the best option is polymerase chain reaction or PCR, but this PCR is not that easy like doing PCR for this COVID-19, because in COVID-19 we know the identifiable microbe, that is SARS-CoV-2 virus, but in Shapu we don't know exactly which organism is it. To perform the PCR, you need a primer against that suspected organism. Now, which primer to use for Shapu cases? So we use for bacteria. Should we use for fungus? Should we use for virus? If yes for bacteria, which bacteria? There is a wide range of 300-400. Okay, So till that we don't know exactly which is the culprit organism, and this can be resolved with the help of doing a comprehensive multiplex PCR, and above that the gene sequencing. Okay, that's the last answer for getting the exact etiology for this Shapu disease. And we had talked about the study risk factors analysis in 2017, but this plan for the lab investigation of doing comprehensive PCR and whole genomic sequencing, this is we are doing for the 2019 outbreaks. We already had an outbreak as expected in 2019, and in those samples we are performing this test, and hopefully if we didn't have this lockdown time, we didn't have this corona outbreak, by this time we might have had the answer of Shapu etiology, but everything got halted with this pandemic situation. So as we talked before, even in the multivariate analysis, the white moth was found to be culprit, and the picture that is on the right side that I wanted to show you is that's a female variant of white moth. The brown hairs or the hair drop and the white are the eggs. So these eggs are protected or embedded within the hairs. And this photograph I have already shown. So what is the knowledge gap? We are yet to explain why the Shapu occurs only in children, why not adult, and why only in one eye, why it is not occurring in the next time. That's good that it affects unilaterally, but why there should be reason for why the other eye is spared, why there is no recurrence, why there is seasonal, why only in Nepal, why mainly in Pokhara. We have assumption like this could be the explanation thought, but we don't have like 100% proof that yes, this is because of this reason. Yes, it is mainly in Pokhara because of the caves. The caves are the places where mostly the moths breed. This could be reason, but yet we need a climatic or geographical study to prove it. And as I said earlier, we came to know that it's because of white moth, but a special study on moth has to be done to identify the species of moth. We have to focus whether the moth is acting as a vector for transmission of microorganisms from a plant to the eye of the person, or is it injecting venom like the snake does, or like the toxins like released by like bees or oringal bite, or it is just a factor for inducing a uveatogenic agent in the eye, leading to the antigen antibody reactions. Okay, these has to be explained to solve the Shapu mystery. So still, until it is solved, the moth saga is still a mystery. So we had written a review article with the past 40-year experience about seasonal hyperactive pan-uveitis. It was published in 2018, and it makes me feel good that this article, and particularly myself, I got recognition as the Japanese Young Investigator Award for this particular article. So we have certain knowledge. Okay, it could be this, it could be this, but still, with even all this knowledge, we are still in a state of confusion. Way to move forward, whether to treat the Shapu cases just with antibiotics because it is an infective origin, or to treat the Shapu cases with steroids because it could be of the immunological origin. So this way out is not yet found for Shapu. And to solve that, as I said, like in 2019 we have been doing this. We got this global ophthalmology award from the Bears, and now we are on this to identify the biomarkers and the genomics, and doing the comprehensive PCR to identify the etiology of Shapu. So even in this COVID time, I'm coming to hospital regularly to for performing our walks for this project. And next important thing is like whatever could be the result, main thing is like you have to train the grassroots levels, volunteers, or mainly we see that these people with blue sarees. Okay, these are the community health workers, female community volunteer health workers. They are the grassroots level at the villages. When something happens, these are the first person the villages contact for their illness. Okay, if we train them to identify the difference between a SHAPU case and a conjunctivitis. So we don't expect high from them. At least we should make them capable of differentiating conjunctivitis from SHAPU. If we can do that, they can refer the cases right on time if they suspect it to be SHAPU. That's why we performed a training session also for this community health workers. We went to Pokhara and we have trained more than 100 of them. Now we are hopeful that for the subsequent outbreak of SHAPU, they will have one level of knowledge that these are the cases which has to be referred on time to the respective hospital, to the nearest eye hospital, so that they can prevent blindness in the child. Okay, and this is the picture very close to me. This is one of the poem that we had used and we have been using for creating awareness of SHAPU. And this poem, I'm especially thankful to Bipin, who has very rightly, with very true meanings, had written this poem. Okay, this poem was written early in 2017, but what at that time we had not performed yet the epidemiological study, and there was no proof that SHAPU could be 100% or could be close as could have close association or very near association with white moth. But before that, with his insight, Bipin had written this poem, and every line of it matches with the outcome of the SHAPU study. I think maybe at the end, I would like to request Bipin to read it out because it will be he would be the best person to narrate in his own tones. We are also using various pamphlets to create awareness, and we are spreading this kind of we are doing this work in collaboration with the Health Ministry of Nepal, EDCT, World Health Organization, and the respective hospitals, and we are spreading these pamphlets or these flexes in various this wards or primary healthcare divisions of especially Gandaki province to create the awareness. So now take home message is SHAPU is our disease. Okay, why it is our, it is why we say that we have the right, because it's reported only from Nepal. Since it is reported from Nepal, we don't expect any foreigners to come over here and do the solve the mystery for it. We have to do it ourselves. Next thing is out of Nepal also, it's mainly in Gandaki province. Urgent referral to hospital for early treatment can prevent SHAPU blindness. That's why the time gap is very important. Early you identify, early you suspect, early you refer, early you intervene, that can prevent the blindness in that cases. Now what happened is during this lockdown time in the last, I think last 2 weeks back, we had SHAPU sporadic outbreak at Pokhara. They had correctly identified the disease, but the presentation time was more, and some difficult cases need to be referred to us from Pokhara for further intervention, but this could not happen because of this pandemic situation. And finally, both the child has lost they have lost their sight. Okay, we have to. I feel that SHAPU is not a disease just for an ophthalmologist. It is a disease for all of us because we have to work together from our level, because we don't want any child to go blind from SHAPU. We all know that there should be collaborative work from right from the female health community workers, this ophthalmic assistant, optometrist, and the ophthalmologist. Because if we want to walk fast, then we can walk alone. But if we want to walk far, then we should walk together. So that was all about SHAPU. Let me add one slide. Like this is the link of one of the knowledge, attitude, and practice questionnaire. That's a survey. We want to know what is the present understanding, what is the present attitude, and what practice might be our optometrist students adopting, or the optometrists adopting to beat against COVID-19. So I'd be sending this link to Bipin or Sweta, and please, all of you, please respond it. It will take your 5 to 7 minutes. Please respond it genuinely, because this your outcome of this survey is going to help the policymakers to address the present scenario in among the healthcare workers. So this is my last slide where I'm showing pictures of all these SHAPU patients starting from a 38 days old child until the 25 years old patient, which we had seen in our SHAPU outbreak time. I thank you all for your patient hearing, and this child is very important for me in my career, because this was the first SHAPU child who had presented during 2017 outbreak. He lost his sight. You can see that the affected eye, that is the right eye, is smaller than the left eye. He lost the sight, but he has not lost the smile. Okay, the smile he's carrying on. So this photo always smiles, gives me inspiration that we have to have the victory against SHAPU. We have to identify the etiology. We have to get rid of this mystery. So once again, I thank you all, and I'm ready to take your questions. And I also request Bipin for his point.
Thank you for the session, ma'am. It was very informative for all of us. I believe this session has broadened our understanding of SAPO. Nepal Optometrician Society is very thankful for your time and presentation. If anyone has any queries, please write in the comment box.
Ma'am, I'm not seeing the poem clearly.
Yeah, I'm enlarging it, Bipin, for you.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
Wait, I'm trying to go back here. Can you see Bipin?
No, ma'am, not so clearly. Yes, I have written it nearly 3 years back. I have forgotten a number of lines.
So I really liked your Doordarsita for this poem.
Ma'am, now I can see.
Yeah.
Now I can see.
Okay.
Now I'm going to start. Hope you all will listen it, and hope you will like it also. आज एउटा कुरा गरौँ सुन बाबु नानी, पुतलीलाई छुने खेल्ने छान्नु पर्छ बानी, नगर्नु सेतो पुतलीलाई छुने मार्ने काम, लाग्छ अनौठो रोग एउटा सापु जसको नाम, आँखा रातो हुन्छ यसमा सेतो हुन्छ नानी, जति नै गुम्न सक्छ यसमा अनि आँखालाई गर्छ हानि, यो रोगको धेरै असर मध्य पहाडी क्षेत्रमा, ठुला बडाको भन्दा धेरै असर बच्चा बच्चीको नेत्रमा, राति सुत्दा झुलो लगाऊ झ्यालढोकामा जाली, नसुत्नु है कहिले कोही रात सेतो बत्ती बाली, वर्षायाम पछि आउँछ हजुर सापुको महामारी, सबै होसियार बनी आफू पनि होसियार बनी सबलाई दिउँ है जानकारी. Ma'am, last line is not visible, ma'am.
यो रोगको निर्मूल पार्न चाहिन्छ सबैको साथ, हामी सबै जुटौँ अब मिलाई
हातमा हात.
Yeah. Thank you, Bipin.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your support. It means a lot of me. To me, I think it's because of your effort. This poem is being used for the awareness in various local levels. Hope this poem will be beneficial in near future also. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bipin. So, is there any question that we can take up?
Ma'am, we have one question from Chiranjeevi. His query is, does transmission of SAPU takes place from person to person like that of microbial infections?
No, it does not get transferred even from one eye to other eye. So person to person transmission is never have been reported. That's why this disease is very peculiar. Like we are not supposed to get scared from any SHAPU patient, because we are not going to get contracted just by examining the eye of that patient. So any other questions?
Ma'am, there's one question from Astadi.
Yeah.
She says, why does this disease occur once in a lifetime?
So that is why we are trying to get the answers of this kind of questions. Okay, it's never a recurrent disease. So if it would have been infection, it could have reoccurred. Even if there are a lot of immunological diseases which reoccurs, you might have been seeing like you can identify SHAPU patient just by seeing the thickness of the file they are carrying with them in their OPD. Okay, usually the SHAPU patients they have in case of uveitis patient you can identify them from distance by seeing the thickness of the file they are carrying with. Okay, because they usually have reoccurrence in the same eye or in the other eye, but SHAPU patient we have not seen any recurrence till date. So we need the explanation for this also. We're trying to solve this mystery, and maybe once I or the answer comes to this, we'll share with you also.
Ma'am, we have one question from Gauri Chaudhary. Her question is, why doesn't it spread to other organs?
So it does not spread. That's quite good. Let's not just think about organ. It does not spread even to its nearest tissues from the eye. It's not spreading to brain. It's not spreading to nose or not spreading to any other eye or ear. That distance is spread through the blood or through the lymph node. It's never reported. And why it's not spread? Yes, I admit that I don't have answer for it, because that's why it's called a mysterious disease. There are lots and lots of mysteries that we have to solve together. So anything more, Sweta?
No, ma'am, there are not further questions.
So thank you all for your participations and your patience hearing. Even if you have any queries in your future, I'm happy to answer them anytime. That it's not mandatory that you can ask me only at this time. I'm available to you at any time, and you may ask your queries anytime. Okay. And Vipin, I'll be sending you the link. Please get connected. Okay.
We'll send the link in the group chat, ma'am, in the Facebook group chat.
And
I'll share
the
this link.
thing, okay, you and please get it back on time also. Okay, thank you everybody.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
End the session. Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Bye, ma'am.
Welcome. Bye bye.